Welcome to the working world. I'm Karen Mendez.
And I'm Jamie Lingham.
Jamie, we just met with Gerard, the CEO from InternMach, and Naren, the program director from Career Success Australia. And what an amazing conversation. We shared so much, I'm out of words.
Unlike you, I've got to say, Karen, but look, you're right. I think that the whole, graduate sector and the intern sector is massive for industry, particularly in this post-COVID bounce back, that the world has been going through. Obviously, a lot of the conversation just, focused on Australia, but also I think internationally, there's still a lot of movement there, and there's a massive amount of value that can be had. And I've just got to say that the passion and the purpose behind these two guys and the organisations they work for was absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it just, I guess, not having spent a lot of time in my career in this early career sector of HR and mobility, it blows my mind around the various considerations on both sides, not only from the corporate, but also from the candidate's perspective. And I think probably one of the biggest things I took away from this, without giving too much away, was that the value really behind internships to both sides of the coin. So definitely one to watch for all our general HR, but also our mobility population who are considering international,
even the recruiters,
virtual internships. Guys, watch this one. Hi, Gerard and Naren. How are you? Welcome to the working world. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks for having us. Now, Gerard, I wanted to jump straight into the questions and start with you, if I may. Where we're going to center our conversation today around internships and those being, the future of the Australian workforce. But as the CEO of InternMach, I noticed that you are very passionate, and I saw your video on the website, great video, by the way, about supporting the pathways for international students from the education sector to the real world. Can you tell us a little bit about InternMach's role in this process?
Yeah, sure. And that video that you watched was the story behind that was some international students that I had helped put into internships as a thank you, went and created a documentary on me. And they did it by stealth, went around and interviewed a whole lot of people, and then got told one day I had to be in our boardroom for a presentation. Actually, it was upstairs in our building. There's about 30 people there. And they played this video to me for the first time. And it actually did bring tears to my eyes because they got quite personal about it. But so international students wanting to give back for the work that we do. And part of that, I think the passion is really important, Karen. And the background, on maybe a little bit of the background of how I got to where I am is important, because the why is always important. And for what we do now. But back in 2016, I was an outsourced CFO for a number of different clients, and one of them was in international education. And I got to learn about the industry, and walking through the corridors of a college that had 3,000 international students, mainly from the subcontinent. You bump into people, you meet people, you chat, and you hear all the stories, and it's the stories that really resonate. And I remember speaking to a young lady from Nepal, where her whole village had saved up to send her to Australia to do an IT degree for a better life. But it wasn't just a better life for her, it was for her family and for her village. And the part where it gets very stressful is as they graduate, the expectation is they now have a job, a high-paying job. And that's not for them to go and live a luxurious lifestyle. It's to send money home, pay off the debt that the family and family members have contributed, and to support their family back home. Now, at the end of that 2-year degree, 3-year degree, if you don't have a job at the end of it, that then becomes a very stressful period of life, and extreme anxiety kicks in, because calling mum and dad and saying, hey, I've done my IT degree, but I'm driving an Uber, is a pretty daunting situation. It was on those stories that inspired me to go and do something about it. And I started challenging the education system and thought, well, a university, is it their job to give someone a degree, or is it their job to get someone a job? And you can have debates with vice chancellors about this, really heated debates about it. And you know which way I obviously would stand. And I ended up giving up of trying to convince the unis that their job is to get someone a job, that they're paying. If you go and buy a car from a car dealership, you want it to be able to drive out of the dealership and be able to go and use it for the next 10 years. A degree, you want to be able to go and work in IT for the next 10, 20 years. And if you can't do that, then your return on investment is close to zero, right? You've gone and spent $80,000 to not get the outcome that you want. So I thought, right, that's what I'm going to go and do. And I started a business called Outcome.life, which was based around choose your outcome, change your life. And it was all focused on jobs for international students. And the big part of that was, how do I get experience if no one will give me experience? That paradox is a critical cycle to break. Once you're in the system, you stay in the system. Getting in the system is hard. And I thought, if I can just solve that problem for international students, then we're going to be able to make a difference. And that's what started the business. We're now the biggest internship placement company in Australia, also in the UK. We've gone into Africa with some other programs. And where I see the real value is that you've got businesses can try before they buy, in a way that we've got access to some of the best and brightest talent. A lot of them weren't born in Australia, but they have skills and experience from back home. They bring diversity of thought, and they bring characteristics like motivation and not being entitled is pretty important. And then we're able to connect them into businesses in a win-win situation where we want them to do real work, usually for 3 months, embed themselves in a business. And it's like a 3-month interview. So we all know you can't decide who to interview in a 45-minute, who to hire in a 45-minute interview. But if you've got 3 months to work with someone, you've got a pretty good indication if they're going to fit into your business. So it's become a really popular way in Australia to recruit, do an internship model, and you've got a way of screening out people for who you bring into your business. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Gerald, at the start, it must have been pretty tough. I think, you sort of had the solutions for the students, which is all well and good. How did you go getting it out into the market, into companies? What were the objections that you had, and what were the struggles that you went through?
Wearing out shoe leather. So I think I remember probably having a coffee with you 5 years ago, Jamie.
Absolutely. I was there at start. Absolutely.
Pitching my talent very early on. And a lot of it first was just using our own networks to say, hey, can you give this young person an opportunity? And at times it was begging people, just give them a chance. But then as you build up the case studies of the outcomes, it gets easier and easier over time. There's been a lot of subconscious bias we have to work through. It still exists today. It's probably worse back when we started, but to be blunt about it, some Australians are racist and they don't want people working for them. They don't look like them and the same as them, or accents. People don't have an accent. Maybe they can't talk to my clients. And so there has been a lot of that to work our way through. We get around a lot of that by using videos. We often try and put videos in front of our clients, and then they see how well they speak and how they present and what they're about. It's really hard to promote someone through a CV because every CV looks the same and there's no personality in a CV. A video, you can give the personality, and that's how we try and break down some of those biases. But we've now done over 12,000 placements, and things kick along really well. But the first few years, Jamie, it was a slog.
Yep. No, I remember it well.
And Naren, in your role as the project director for Career Success Australia, you would see firsthand the benefits of the internships to the organisations where you're working with. Can you share with us what you see as the value of these placements that bring to both the corporation and the candidate?
Yeah, happy to share my thoughts based on my experience in internships. Probably not as much as Gerard, but certainly we have worked with a few universities, and we help students and graduates to apply their theory, what they learn at university, into a real world setting. So maybe from a company perspective, I think the value there's a few different angles to this. I suppose from your startup businesses and SMEs that may not have the budget to scale up and hire a big team, having an intern certainly sort of helps them to achieve their business goals by bringing on someone who's really passionate and keen and motivated to come on board for 12 weeks and contribute. So I think from that perspective, it really does help some of the smaller companies that don't have massive budgets to spend on headcount. They're also attracting really motivated young people who want nothing more than just to prove themselves, to get their first break in corporate land. And that's sometimes hard to find with when you hire people. They come with all these terms and conditions about, I've got to leave at this time and I want this salary. Whereas with an intern, they're just desperately keen to get involved in as much as possible. So having that, that energy in the workplace is fantastic. So from a company perspective, they're getting access to really, motivated talent. Plus, it's a potential, a pipeline of early career professionals that maybe start off as an intern and prove themselves, they perform well, and then they can transition into a graduate role. So the company is saving on recruitment costs. We do a lot of recruitment, and in some roles, it's not cheap, but in terms of having to pay a recruitment agent money to find a young person who may only stay around for 12 months and then they go off to another role. So again, their return on investment is not fantastic. Whereas, you have an intern, they transition. And I think the intern also has some sort of loyalty to the company that's given them that opportunity, either in their final year of study or, as soon as they graduate. So the intern wants to, pay that company back. So I think there's a whole range of benefits for the company. And then from the interns' perspective, we've had a number of interns come to us and say, what I learned in that 12 weeks has been more important and more valuable than what I've done in my 3-year accounting degree. So the life skills they learn on the internship, the technical industry skills that they're learning is invaluable for them. So I'm a huge advocate for all education providers to have work integrated learning as part of their degrees, and sadly it doesn't happen enough. And I think that's partly because there's a resourcing issue from the university side. There's probably a lack of appetite from industry side to formally accept interns. So and then there's also a bit of a grey area with Fair Work guidelines as to what constitutes an internship. So I think there's probably got to be a bit more clarity around all of these things. But certainly it's when it works well, it's a massive win for the company. It's a massive win for the intern candidate. So I would just love to see more of these internships happening.
I love your passion with it. Both Gerard and yours, obviously, both of you are very passionate, which is great. And I just want you to expand a little bit more, because I've sort of been exploring this or discussing this with a few companies at the moment, is just talking about how they can work better with educational institutions. I'll say that correctly. Because, like in my mind, what we're talking about today is obviously the university sort of finishes off and hands the student across to you guys, and then you help marry them up with a company for an internship. But I'm thinking more that are there opportunities for educational institutions to actually make that work part of their course? Have you done it, and do you see it happening in the future? So where they can actually study the course, but as part of their course, they could be working in industry.
Yeah, I'm happy to start and lead in with some degrees. It's compulsory to do an industry placement like all engineering degrees.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. There's a lot of IT degrees that will have an elective unit as a work integrated learning program. But Swinburne, I used to work at Swinburne many years ago, and they have a wonderful industry-based learning program, IBL, where it's for all domestic students. I think now they're introducing it for internationals, where after their second year of a three-year degree, they go off for 1 year for a paid internship.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. RMIT are very strong in that area as well. So it is catching on, but, there's a lot of work behind it for the universities. Some of them are on very tight budgets, not the big ones, but some of the medium to small universities are running pretty lean. And organizing these industry placements embedded within a degree takes time, it takes resourcing, and so it's not always possible. But as I mentioned earlier, I think it's that's the way education should be heading, which is an type of experience where it's not just about attending lectures and tutorials and things like that. It's actually going out into the real world with partner companies. So there's a lot of work that can be done around that area.
Gerald, can I just get your thoughts on that as well? Because I think it's a really important topic, and I think maybe also not just universities and not just degrees. Like, do you think there's opportunity for companies to work closely with educational institutions to develop these types of programs?
Yeah, so I'll give you a a case study on that, Jamie. So Coca-Cola is one of our clients across all of Australia, and they deal exclusively with us. And they refuse to work directly with the universities because they've tried it and it was too painful. So what they've said to us, said, Gerard, feed me enough students that are coming through. I don't care which university they come from, we'll screen them, but we just want to work with you because we're the bridge in the process to make it actually work evenly. And the issue that you have is you might go and work with one of the big universities in Melbourne, but every faculty does things differently. So the person you speak to is different. The faculty rules are different. It becomes too hard. And as we know in business, people just want stuff really simple and really easy, or they just disengage. And that's what Coca-Cola's story was. And because we do all the heavy lifting for them, we put a fair bit of time into them as well, and well worth it. But it just means that they can have a seamless approach of accessing the university system. And there's a lot of companies that have gone through that process before. With universities are notoriously difficult to work with for lots of different reasons. And so unless you're probably a BHP and working with Curtin University in Perth around a big specialised mining project, or developing some really technical, biotechnical intellectual property, the unis love doing that deep research stuff. But when it comes to sort of your commerce and your IT and your engineering general degrees, it can be a bit of a challenge. So we find that they do like businesses like ours, the industry do, because we can take away all that pain and suffering. And all they want, give me a person that's ready for the role I want, that I can interview and I choose to take on. That's all I want. I don't care about all the other stuff and their history around it. And I should say too, Jamie, there's a lot of universities and private colleges now looking to embed degrees, internships into their programming. I know there's a university in Adelaide that I know took about 40 MBA students from a university in Melbourne. So they had enrolled, they were applying, they were about to enroll, and all of a sudden they worked out through Prisms that they all went to this other university in Adelaide. They're like, what the hell happened on there? And then this university in Melbourne realised the university in Adelaide had guaranteed an internship, and they lost 40 students straight away.
Massive. Yeah, that's massive.
This university in Melbourne is now guaranteeing internships to their MBA students. Right. Wow. So and the reason that's happening is offshore, when parents are meeting with unis, and I've got this from lots of agents, so it's not just me saying it who's biased. The number one question they're getting asked, will my son or daughter do a work placement as part of their degree? And if the answer is no, they're moving to the next university. So the hand is being forced by the unis that they've got to embed more these placements into their degrees, or money talks, they're going to lose enrollments, they're going to lose money. So, and Naren touched this before, the career sectors departments are generally underfunded inside universities, despite how critical it is. Now that the hand's being forced, they've got to invest more money into this part.
Awesome.
Wow. Gerard, if we'll just stick with you for a moment, obviously, you spoke about that case study around Coca-Cola and the role that you're playing around bridging that gap between the education sector and what that particular client wants. Are you hearing from either Coke or some of your other corporate clients any other requirements around that early career stage and the skill shortages that we've kind of all finding in the marketplace at the moment?
It's a really easy question, Karen.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
The number one thing across all sectors and skills that businesses want is attitude.
Okay.
Right?
Can you expand on that?
Yeah. One, don't be entitled.
Right.
Two, don't want Jamie's job in your third month.
Yes.
I'm surprised they wait to 3 months, but keep going.
Yeah. But starting my career in the early 2000s, and I'm sure we can all reflect on that, not reflect on anyone's age, but like when we started our careers, we just did whatever. I'd clean toilets, and I literally did clean toilets. Like I don't care, and you do it, and you work your way up, and you just know you hustle, work hard, and your career will unfold.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have that with young people anymore, and it's no surprise saying that, right? Everyone's talking about it. So it's just having like that positive energy and attitude, and wanting to put in and do the extra bit. And getting to work is not what you get paid for. It's what you deliver at work is what you get paid for, right? And you don't, anything you do above that is part of your job. And you can't necessarily train for that. So a lot of employers will say now that I can teach the technical skills. So if it's an accountant, I can teach them how to use Xero. If it's a someone working in an IT role that has particular software they need to use, you can learn that. You can watch YouTube videos. You can learn the technical stuff if you've got a basic level of competence.
Yeah.
That whole attitude piece and, you know, being a cultural fit inside a business is now the higher priority, because the other part is easier to teach.
Makes sense.
You find that more with an international student, or as opposed to local Australians, or are the international students, because not the Nepalese ones coming from the village, but perhaps other ones from more affluent families, are they in the same boat? Are they still coming across with a level of entitlement because they've come from, you know, wealthy parents who can afford them to send them to university over here or to study?
Yeah, I think you know the answer to that question, Jamie. And it's like the international students are on a bell curve as well, right? There are some that are just mega entitled, and yes, if they come from a wealthy family, and then you got others that, you know, Bruce people that come from Colombia that they will do anything they can to break in the employment market here and work hard, and, you know, they're sending money home, and like they are grateful and they are hustlers. So yeah, I think it's every individual for their own. In general, I think the international students know they got to work hard. The underdog always works harder. So yes, there's that level of it, but you also do get the extremes.
Okay.
Naren, I wonder if you could weigh on this and expand a little bit further, because I guess, you know, career coaching is a pillar of what your team does at Career Services Australia and part of the service offering. And you support candidates, I guess, not only at this early career stage, but at all stages of the career. You know, are you seeing a similar kind of, it almost sounds like a generational kind of trend around the work ethic? And are you also seeing a growing demand for coaching services, either just in general or around supporting that kind of pushback from talent? And is it coming from particular stages of career or particular industries that you're getting that demand for career coaching?
Yeah, we certainly have seen a big spike in sort of mid-career professionals that are you know, rethinking their career direction, switching careers. We see a lot of teachers, people from the healthcare sector that are a bit burnt out, and they want to sort of redefine their career. So we have we've had to sort of revisit our program offering and now branch out into careers counselling and guidance, and working with mid-career professionals on, you know, their identity as a professional and who they are and where they're heading and what are their transferable skills from being a teacher for 15 years. What can I do next? So we have been doing quite a lot of work in that area, where people are a bit burnt out. I think they've realised that there's a bit more to life than going and working in IT or accounting or finance or whatever it is, 9 to 5 for 50 years, and then, you know, what happens next? And I think people are now prepared to compromise on time and potentially salary to pursue something that where they're inspired and energized to go every day. So there's that part of it. But I might just touch on something that we spoke about earlier, which is around, you know, the graduates and their attitudes. And I think what Gerard mentioned earlier is spot on. It's about, you know, the companies want interns and graduates who are prepared to work hard. They're going to take initiative. They're not just going to sit around with their managers away for 4 hours and go, well, no one's here to tell me what to do. I guess I'll have to wait. And that's hard to teach. But I also feel there's a big gap in expectations. We see a lot of university students and graduates that have this expectation that a really good job at 60K when they have no experience and limited skills is sort of guaranteed when they finish their course. So I think aligning the expectations to say, listen, just because you've done a 3-year commerce degree and you've majored in marketing and maybe information systems doesn't guarantee you anything. You have to work hard. You have to pursue either internships or knock on doors and get your foot in the door. You can't just send out 1,000 resumes, get 1,000 rejections, and then complain that no one's giving you a chance. So, and sometimes there's a misalignment in skills, and all it takes is for someone to have a little bit of guidance. We do this with a lot of university students, which is you study 50 job ads for a front-end developer graduate position. And if you don't have 50% of the skills that you read on that ad, you've got to do something about it. And don't blame the university for not teaching you. Yes, you can blame them, but you also have access to Udemy and YouTube and other platforms to retrain and upskill. So I think there's a bit of expectation alignment that has to happen as well, because Gerard mentioned the bell curve. You have a bell curve with university graduates. You'll have the cream of the crop that will, go off and do big and bright, amazing things at the top tier companies in grad programs. But then you've got the other sort of 20% who, God help them. And then you've got that middle band, which some will make it, some won't. So it's interesting to see, the variety of students and graduates that come to organizations like ours and Gerard's. But going back to your point, Karen, yes, we are seeing more and more people coming to us wanting that sort of career guidance. I mean, just recently we're starting to work with, I looked at his profile and I was intimidated. He's worked in government for 15 years. He's got a PhD. I mean, he's worked for ministers and he's coming to us saying, public sectors, I'm done. Like, I don't know what to do next. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, if he's clueless, he's writing, research papers on monetary policy. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how are we going to help him? But he needs that sort of counseling support to identify what else is out there. So it's a very interesting time at the moment.
Do you think a bit of that is because of, sorry, Jamie, do you think a little bit of that is because of COVID? Like you talked about the medical sector and the teachers, right? As soon as you said that, I was like, that's got to be burnout from COVID.
Certainly is, yeah. That is the trend, that, people have had obviously a lot of time to think about their lives and careers and family and things. So it's very interesting.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm quite interested to know when you do the career counselling, so putting an intern in, how do you manage that through that internship period? Do you check in with them? Do you make sure they're on the right track? Do you make sure the employer? I'm just curious to see how the mechanics work. Is it a set and forget, or are you constantly keeping in touch with them?
Look, you have to have certain touch points with both the intern and the host company. Normally, I always say no news is good news from both parties, but we encourage the interns that we work with to complete a weekly logbook of activities. What have you learned? What have you been able to apply from university? What skills have you developed? So that at the end of the 12 weeks, they can revisit that logbook and then add that to their resume and LinkedIn profile. But it's also good to check in with the host company to make sure that the intern's progressing as per their expectations. And you can catch any issues earlier on rather than waiting till week 10.
I love that. Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, this thing has to end. It's important to have that regular check-in with both parties.
Absolutely.
Well, sticking with that favourite subject of COVID, Gerard, I wanted you to grab your magic ball and give it a shake, because we love to do that here at The Working World, and ask our guests around their predictions for the future, and particularly around the international student market, as it's kind of regaining its momentum since COVID, and the bit of the downturn that came about because of that. What are your predictions for how internships will shape the job market in Australia over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think it is shifting a bit, Karen, and let's hope there's not another pandemic in the next 90 years, that we've done our one for now in my lifetime. And where it's frustrating the international education sector is the knee-jerk reaction of government, right? And international students get blamed for everything because they can't vote. And if you think about, if we go back a couple of years to the pandemic, and I don't know if you guys remember, but remember restaurants were struggling to open coming out of the pandemic because they couldn't get enough chefs, people to serve. And then people started saying, people not inside the industry, obviously we're aware of it, but people going, oh, who was doing those jobs? You're like, oh, it was all the international students. Oh, how do we get them back? Like, everyone, get international students back in the country. We need to be able to go and have our dinner at our local restaurant. So all of a sudden, everyone loved them. And this is after the start of the pandemic, when Scott Morrison told them all to go home. And I jumped on Flight Centre that day, and there was literally no flights from Australia to India on the day he said go home. So it's such a fickle thing for international students. And now that there's a housing shortage, the easy thing to do is to blame the international students. Now, the facts are it's got nothing to do with international students for why we've got a shortage of rental properties, but they can't vote, so it's easy to blame. So a sort of bit of context there about the macro environment and a bit of a reach out for international students that we support you. But what it also means that when you think about how the world's changed with remote working and the way that people move around the world, we're seeing a bit of interest now for people to look at someone to do an internship with someone while they're offshore. And that's almost like the test period, and then bring them to Australia, right? So because people work remotely now, we're doing this remotely. You know, in 2019, we probably would have all gotten a room together and filmed this, but we all work remotely now. And so you could bring someone to Australia and hope that they're good. And we all know, having all hired people in our own businesses, you've actually got no idea when you hire someone if they're actually going to be any good. Like it is seriously a 50-50 chance. And so you can bring someone in and hope they're the greatest and that's going to work out. And after 3 months, it hasn't. You're like, oh, now what do I do? Or you could consider having someone work remotely with you, whether through an internship or whatever, from their home country for 3 months, test it all out. Yes, we've got a good vibe with each other, and then bring them to Australia. So we're starting to do a lot more of that cross-border internships. Students are also asking, even our Australian students are asking, hey, I'd love to do an internship with a company in Indonesia or a company in the UK. You work out the time differences, you can make it happen. People wouldn't have thought about that in 2019 as much. So I think maybe that's a bit of a shift, Karen, where we can broaden our horizon a bit as to how we engage with interns. Or there could be a company that's looking to expand into the UK. You know, one of our clients is University of Surrey. I could get a student from the University of Surrey to intern from an Australian company from the UK, and they've got instant insights into the UK market, right? So by default, by having someone there, they're getting market intelligence for free by having someone on the ground in the UK, and they're doing it through an internship placement. So there's different ways to think about a global context of businesses now, and you can use interns to the business advantage for the right reasons in doing it.
Have you got any sense of the size of the global market? I mean, is this a growing, industry? And it not just in, I suppose the question will be, is it growing in Australia, but also around the world?
So if you look at, obviously, education's not going anywhere, right? Although there's some really cool stuff going on. People are building AI universities now. Like there's some stuff that's going on in the background that'll take 5 years to come to life. But AI is changing the way education works because you don't need knowledge anymore, right? So traditionally you need knowledge, now you need to be able to apply it. So, and the way you use AI tools now, people need to have different skill sets. So I was having a good debate with someone at an event 3 or 4 nights ago about will universities still exist in 20 years' time, right? And there is very good reasons for why they won't. The Ivy Leagues will, but everyone else, you actually don't need them. And so the form of education is around how we do it will change. But then if you think about, say, in job placements, and I'm seeing a lot of this now, particularly out of the subcontinent, is that parents could choose to send their kid to Australia to go and do a 2-year degree for $120,000, whatever it is, or educate at home. And the universities in China are now some of the best in the world. The universities in India are growing. Education is becoming more democratized. So you could go and learn at home and then come to Australia for a 3-month internship. So we've got some people from Nepal coming into Melbourne this week who are coming for a 3-month internship at a Melbourne company, and then they're going to go home. Now that might cost the family Australia's expensive to live, $10,000, $15,000 as opposed to 120. So they've got the same level of education, they've got Australian work experience, and they go home to apply it. There's just different models that are emerging.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Naren, from the other side, from the corporate view, the focus around internships, the focus just generally speaking in relation to retaining skilled talent in Australia is a challenge. We all know that. And I think, we've spoken at length today about internships, and I don't know, I'm pretty convinced they're a pretty good solution here, but I might be biased given that I've just spent, the last 30 minutes chatting with you guys, but are internships a solution for a lot of Australian organisations to these, skill shortages or retaining the skilled talent? And if so, what should corporates focus on around attracting that talent and then retaining them?
Yeah, look, I think certainly, hosting interns is a fantastic way to bridge immediate skills shortages. From a company's perspective, and we hear this a lot when we do talk to companies, they would love to have an intern. However, they're a bit fearful of the amount of training and effort that goes into getting them up to speed for just 12 weeks. Some companies actually say, look, we potentially have an intern, but we'd like to have them for 6 months. Because, I mean, even if it's an experienced person, it might take them 12 weeks just to, get up to speed in a new role, let alone finally a student or a recent graduate with no corporate experience. So there is sometimes a bit of a pushback from companies saying, yeah, look, we just don't, we're too busy. So we have this conversation a lot with a lot of companies where they say, that they're super busy, they've got work coming out of left, right, and center, and we present them with a solution saying, look, we've got candidate ABC with the skills you need, and they've got a little bit of work experience in that area from their home country. They're ready to go, and you don't have, and there's no cost. And they still push back and they say, yeah, but we just don't have the staff to actually sit down with them, show them the software, show them the system, show them the projects, and so we sometimes host companies just say no in that situation. So yeah, so look, there's sometimes this, but at the same time, you have other companies that are just so open to the idea because they see the value in having that person come in and help out on different projects. Plus, they have a longer term vision to say, look, let's get them in. We'll get them on that project, in that particular team for that 12 weeks. If they work out, we know we have plenty of work coming up for the next 12 months. They've already learnt the systems. It hasn't really cost us anything. And yes, let's put them on as a full-time graduate. So yes.
Naren, sorry to cut in, Naren, do you find that a lot of clients don't understand the 485 visa? Because it's like this world's best kept secret or worst kept secret in that they don't just have 3 months. There's 2 years or sometimes 3 years of full working rights that can then roll into permanent residency. And I find it really frustrating that most companies in Australia just don't understand it. Do you have the same problem?
Look, we do have a little bit of pushback, but to be honest, since COVID, I think, companies are more open to having people from all different backgrounds and visa classification. There's still a bit of pushback going, oh, we only want permanent resident visa holders. And I think that's for sort of the formal graduate programs. We're doing some work with a company in Brisbane, a technology company, and they're recruiting for a software engineering graduate. And we've had, the ad on Seek was up for 2 weeks. We had 320 applications within 2 weeks. And sadly, 80% of them, the quality of the applications, the skills matching, it was very easy to reject based on that. So, we don't use an ATS system, application tracking system. We have a couple of my colleagues that are very good at shortlisting. And then even for the top sort of 20% that made it to that sort of initial phone screening, the quality there is not great either. It's a bit of a needle in a haystack. But the interesting thing there, Gerard, going back to the 2-year visa, I just figured this out in this recruitment assignment, is that some of these international graduates in Queensland have 5 years of full-time work rights. And when we pitched that to the company to say, look, finding citizens and permanent resident visa holders are a bit tricky. There's not many good candidates. Would you consider this the 5 years? And they said, look, if the person's got over 4 years of visa, we're happy to consider them. So I think, there is a bit of pushback with that 2-year 485 visa. But interestingly, I actually find there's the good companies we work with, they're very open to having someone with sort of 18 months of work rights. If their attitude and ethic and everything really shines in that interview process. So yeah,
I suppose closing question to both of you. Why can't you go more than 3 months? Like, what is this 12-week magic number? Like, why don't people go to 6 months? Might sound silly to you guys, but to me, I'm like, well, hang on, why can't it happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are like the Swinburne program I mentioned. They offer it as a formal 6-month full-time or 12-month paid internship. So it's like a scholarship. The company has to pay. So Swinburne does it in that way. But the internship guidelines that come under the remit of the Fair Work Ombudsman, and I've been saying this for a few years, there's a lot of grey area in those guidelines. The internships that are deemed legal and fair and ethical and all of that are the vocational placements.
Yeah.
And I sort of disagree with some of the guidelines in that they stipulate that no productive work can be done by the intern. Well, how do you define productive work? Someone that's photocopying some invoices. Well, technically, it would be productive if those invoices are used.
Get paid.
Whoever. So there's a bit of a grey area around that, but normally, it is that sort of 12-week block, which is what a lot of universities stick to. And
what's your thought on that? On the why not 6 months?
Well, yeah, so it comes down to whether you're doing an unpaid or paid internship. So there's no such thing as a paid internship. It's a job, right? It's got to be above minimum wage. You're paying equivalent of $55 a year. So then it comes down to the unpaid internship model, of which to do that lawfully, you need to be connected to training. So you need to be connected to a degree or a vocational program, which unis operate on 12-week semesters, right? So a 12-week semester is 3 months. So it rolls into that. It can be 6 months. You just got to pay them, right? And I agree with this. My cutoff is 12 weeks for an unpaid internship. I think if you want someone for week 13 and onwards, you can have them. Just pay them. Like,
exactly.
I think it's too far beyond 12. And I like 12 because the first 4 weeks, everyone's just learning what the hell is going on. The middle 4 weeks, you start to maybe do a few things. The last 4 weeks, you can actually have a chance to add some sort of value. And it's the last.
You go.
Yeah. It's the last 4 weeks is when you can convert it into a job.
Yeah.
So Australia actually has a good model. I get the fair work. Yeah. But in the UK, it's way worse. Like, it's shocking in the UK for how it works around the internship model. And in Australia, at least, you can do a lawfully unpaid internship, connected to your degree, get some work experience, and ideally get a job. And this is where I suppose my passion for international students come from. Is I've been challenged over the years too, saying, Gerard, what you're doing is slavery. You're putting people into an unpaid job. That's slavery. I'm like, well, hang on. If someone goes to university for that semester and they're paying $10,000 to be at that university, they're not getting paid to sit in a lecture room. In fact, they're paying to be there. I'm putting someone in a workplace so they can learn for that 12 weeks. Right? Now, the question then is, do you do an unpaid internship or no internship? Right? It's not an support, as I'm sure. It's not always unpaid or paid. It's unpaid or nothing. I'd much prefer to get a short-term unpaid internship with the guidance we put around it. There's got to be the learning development. And if they can leverage that unpaid internship into a job, it's the best 12 weeks they've ever spent. So I think Australia does have a pretty good framework compared to some of the other countries. Yes.
Yeah, which circles back to what you were saying earlier, Naren, wasn't it? About those in-role experiences within university degrees.
Yeah, 100%. And, I fear for university graduates coming out without any industry placement or work experience as part of their course, or doing an internship through, Gerard's organization or the many other internship providers, because it's super competitive. I mean, just with this one recent example with the software engineering role in Brisbane, it's like, you can split the candidates that have done a work placement or a capstone project that was with a company. I mean, if the other candidate has just got the 3-year Bachelor of Software Engineering degree and nothing else, maybe some part-time work at Woolies or McDonald's or whatever it may be, even with university projects, it's just not cutting it. It's a competition. And
I love it. I think both of you guys, you're doing a great job. Not only for international students but also for companies. It just sounds like a very highly rewarding business to be in. So and just love having your wisdom on the show. We could probably talk a lot more about a lot more different topics as far as in your space. But obviously, being conscious of time, I want to thank you both.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Need to grab a beer at some point, Jamie.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. You too, Karen. I don't want to leave you out.
Oh, fine. Thanks, Gerard. Thanks, Naren. Take care. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy. See ya.